Okay, so the point of today's class is to really just go over some basics in terms of appraisals, appraisal requirements, sort of understanding how to look at and how to read an appraisal. Um, you know, it's a hot topic, obviously, in this market. Things are being listed and sold at way different prices. Um, and so it's important to understand how to read an appraisal, and then also understand what sort of the parameters are that an appraiser is looking at and what they're required, the standards that they're required to abide by. You know, contrary to anybody's belief, appraisers do have guidelines and certain requirements and restrictions and parameters that they're required to do these reports by. If an appraiser submits a report that is completely off base, they run into troubles with licensing. An appraiser can certainly be blacklisted from any lender or any bank's approved appraiser list. And so just to give a little bit of insight on the process, from a lending perspective and from a bank, and this goes for me, it goes for B of A, it goes for Chase, it goes for any bank or lender or broker that your clients might go to. The appraisals are not at the control of the lender or the bank or the broker. The appraisals are actually handled through a third-party appraisal management company. Back in 2008, 2009, when regulations changed, the federal government went in, and the goal was to protect consumers so that in the case of somebody purchasing a property or even refinancing a property, that the value of that property could not be steered or swayed based on somebody's potential relationship with an appraiser. So back in the old days, you know, I could call up an appraiser and say, hey, Mr. Appraiser, how you doing? How's business? How are the kids? That kind of thing. I need an appraisal done on this particular property. Can you help me out? That's not the case anymore. I can't legally contact the appraiser. So that's the first thing. The appraisals are all controlled by the appraisal management company. When an appraisal is ordered, it goes up into a queue that's online through an appraisal management company. And a handful of appraisers that are in the area that service the area or the property address that is being requested, those appraisers, whoever is available, can go in and essentially grab the assignment and say, yeah, I'm available for this assignment. Here's my turn time. Here's when I'll have it back to you. So the process is kind of random, kind of arbitrary. The appraiser can decide whether or not they want to actually choose to do an assignment. I've had appraisal assignments that have been declined because the property is complicated and maybe an appraiser doesn't have time to do it. So that piece of it is totally out of my hands. We have multiple appraisal management companies that we work with, that we contract through. So Movement Mortgage, for instance, we've got, I think, four appraisal management companies that contract similar appraisers, sometimes the same appraisers, sometimes different appraisers. Depends on the property, depends on the area, you know, all of those things. But we have multiple options for it. So hopefully that was a little insightful on just the background on how they're ordered. I order it on through our system, and then it goes up into the appraisal management company site. And the appraisal management company is then responsible for the correspondence with the appraiser, as well as the upload and the quality of the report. So once an appraiser uploads a report to an appraisal management company site, that appraisal management company scrubs the appraisal to make sure that it meets all of the qualifications and quality control, if you will, of the standards of the appraiser having their license. So I'm going to share my screen. I want to go over a couple of key points. I want to run through this actual appraisal report. These are some clients of mine that refinanced and so forth. The appraisal report for a refinance is going to be very similar to a purchase. The only difference is a refinance versus a purchase. But I want you guys to see what we're looking at and what we review and what comps look like on paper, and also just sort of go through what the criteria is for an appraiser to appraise a property. What actually constitutes a true comparable in a report. So I'm going to share my screen. if I can do that. Okay. Can everybody see that? Hopefully.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so this is page one basically of an appraisal report. You've got the parcel number, the neighborhood name, you know, all of that stuff. This is all public record information. This isn't going to be anything tricky or quirky or anything. The appraisers have access to public records. They're going to pull everything from title as well as from the MLS. And this is where they're getting the bulk of their information. This is where they're getting the square footage information, the tax ID number, the tax amount, all of that information is coming from public records. So if there is a property and there is some sort of variance, you want to obviously draw attention to the appraiser on that variance, whatever it is. Up here in the top box, you're looking at the details of the subject property. Property is currently owner occupied. The property rights are fee simple versus a leasehold. A leasehold would be a property that has a lease, like a condo in Palm Springs, for instance. Those oftentimes have land leases on them. And in that case, this box of the leasehold would be checked. If it were a leasehold, the appraiser is responsible for providing comps in other leased properties as well. Assignment here, is it a purchase? Is it a refinance? For the sake of this discussion, we're going to pretend it's a purchase transaction, and this box would be marked. Under here, you're going to have all the contract information. You're going to have how long it was listed on the market. You're going to have the list price, how many days on the market, and what it's currently under contract for. It's important to know that every appraiser gets a copy of the actual purchase contract. The reason for that is because a property that is sold off market or sold, let's say, between family members is a much different conversation than a property that has actually gone to market and sold on market for a market price and listed at a market price. That situation is completely different. So you're going to have all the information here based on your transaction, based on what you're under contract for. That appraiser goes through the contract to make sure they're verifying if there's any agreed upon credits. If, you know, from the start, if your contract or counteroffer say that the buyer is getting a $10,000 credit from the seller, it would say that here. So the appraiser's aware of what you're under contract for. They know what it was listed for, the whole 9 yards. That's all going to be here. The appraiser would make note here on neighborhood information. What are the trends in the neighborhood? Is it stable? Is it declining? Is it increasing? Market time conditions, so forth. This area here, and we won't get into necessarily rebuttals, but the information that's relayed here could be potential for rebuttal. If there's errors in this box here or in the site information that actually gives the information related to the property, this is where you could catch some potential errors and for rebuttal purposes. But we won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. So you're going to have neighborhood information, site information, utility information, what type of zoning, you know, is there, how many units is it, how many stories, slab foundation versus crawl space, what sort of interior walls and materials and so forth. All of that's going to be here. Again, we're still on the first page of the appraisal. So you want to double check and make sure that you're getting a copy of the report, but that this information is correct. Is the year that the property was built, is that correct? Are the features of the property, you know, an appraiser, nobody's perfect. An appraiser maybe forgot to mark the box that there's a fireplace. You know, could a fireplace affect your value by $50,000? Probably not. But, you know, these are all things to just double check as you're glancing and looking through an appraisal. Usually you're going to pay closer attention if your property under appraises at what you're under contract for. But these are all things to pay attention to. just for accuracy purposes and to make sure that, you know, the appraiser marked the correct boxes and accounted for the correct features. Down here is where the appraiser would comment if the property's been remodeled or anything. In the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, they would make general comments here about the condition and the renovations on the property. So now we're going to go into page 2, and this is where you're going to find actual comps of the property. This first box here, this first column here is going to be your subject property. And then here on out, comp 1, comp 2, comp 3. Generally speaking, an appraiser is supposed to utilize 6 comps in a report. They need at least 3 valid sales, and then there could be pending sales or current listings that are also utilized. But they do have to have a minimum number of comps. And here's where I want to kind of dive in. The true definition of comps. This particular property, it's in Monterey Park. Here's the address, you can see it. Monterey Park. The rest of the comps, you can see this first box underneath the address is the distance from the subject property to each of these comps. The first one's at 0.37 miles, 0.65 miles, 0.13 miles. As you get further out from your subject property, the stickier it can get in terms of convincing somebody that it is an actual comp. If you try to give me a comp that is over a mile away and on the other side of a freeway, we're in a different neighborhood and a different territory altogether. So important to note here when you're looking at an appraisal, look at the proximity of the subject. And this could be useful too in terms of pulling comps for your buyers and your sellers. Distance is everything, especially when you're talking about a densely populated area like Los Angeles. You know, comping something in Larchmont Village to something downtown is not a comp, or comping something in Van Nuys to Burbank is not a comp. Distance is really important when you're talking about comparables. So you want to look here. And generally speaking, especially when you're talking about a densely populated area like Los Angeles, the appraiser is going to look in the immediate area. And generally speaking, that immediate area is anywhere from a half a mile to a mile out. If a mile out takes that appraiser, again, across a freeway or into an entirely different neighborhood, you're going to have a tougher time justifying its comp value because it's further away and because there's additional factors like crossing a freeway or it being in a different neighborhood altogether, different school district, whatever the case is. The further away you get, the tougher time you're going to have justifying it as a comp. So, and you know, I've had appraisals before that are, I had one in particular that was in Burbank, for instance, and the value did not come in where they were under contract for. I forget what the discrepancy was, 50,000 maybe. It came in under value, and we tried to do a rebuttal. And just food for thought here. Anytime we're going to do a rebuttal, I'm going to ask you to pull comps and provide me with the comps. I'm happy to do the argument and go to bat with the appraisal management company, but I don't have access to the MLS, so I can't pull legitimate comps. So that'll be on you guys. Long story short, on this Burbank deal, value came in less. I asked the agent for additional comps. I was provided comps. The property itself was in the Magnolia Park area of Burbank, and the comps, I know they're slim because of the way the market is. One of the comps that I was provided was in the Rancho area of Burbank, which isn't far. It was definitely over a mile away, but the Rancho area of Burbank is much different than the Magnolia Park area of Burbank. Horse property versus not horse property, 6,000 square foot lot versus, you know, a 15,000 square foot lot, much different area. So, you know, still Burbank, not the same thing. just to give you all an idea.
I was wondering, like, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So like on comparable sale one, it's like a 7,000 square foot lot, and the subject property is a 12,000 square foot
Mhm.
lot. Although the house has similar square footage, and then the other, let's see, one of the other comps, the square footage of the house on comp two is only 1,500 square feet
Mhm.
versus 2,300 square feet. Don't you have to stay a little bit closer, or if that's all they got, they had to use?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a kind of a general rule of thumb. I mean, obviously not every house is the same. Not every, and to, I'm going to touch on Lena's comment here too about COVID and lack of comps. Not every house is obviously the same. Not every lot's the same. Not every house has the same bedroom count, and so on and so forth. So as we're looking down these different comps here and down these different columns, you want to look too. So we've got distance. That's a key point. Almost every agent I talk to, the first thing they talk about is price per square foot. That's not the end all be all when you're talking about an actual appraisal. Price per square foot can look and mean different things depending on the property. Obviously, the more expensive, the bigger the house, the less the price per square foot is, right? And the smaller the house, the more expensive the price per square foot is. So like, for instance, this house here, comparable to, the price per square foot is $666. That's because it's a 1,500 square foot house. If you look next door here at the 2,256 square foot house, my price per square foot goes down pretty significantly, right? So when you're pulling comps and arguing for comps, price per square foot is not the end all be all. You want to look at distance. You're going to look down here, down below where it says date of sale and the time. You have your sold date that's here. When we get to the next page and we'll look at listings, it'll have the list date. So this one in particular, this is a recent appraisal. They had to go back almost a year to pull comps. You see this one here? You want to look at these dates. Obviously, the closer you are to the date that you're under contract, the better the comp is. But given the current market and the lack of inventory, an appraiser may have to go back 6 months, 8 months, even 10 months. In those particular cases, though, the appraiser is going to adjust and comment for the market, and they're going to adjust and make comment on time adjustment, because a sale in November of last year is much different than a sale in May of this year, right? Additionally, so to your question, Jen, on site square footage, as well as property gross living area, the appraiser's job is to find comps that are truly comparable and close in nature to whatever our subject is. Again, every lot's going to be different. You're going to have variances. It's the appraiser's job to make adjustments. You'll see here plus 52, plus 38, plus 30. The appraiser made these adjustments based on our subject's bigger lot. So these adjustments are positive and in the direction and in favor of my subject property. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. That makes, yeah. I personally wouldn't know how to calculate that. It would be nice if I knew how to calculate the,
Well, yeah. And to be honest with you, I don't know how or what the formula is for them to calculate adjustments either. Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna just stay in my lane with not being an appraiser. But they are required to make adjustments. And this goes to my point about the appraiser having very specific requirements and qualifications and a job to do when they're appraising a property, that he's giving extra value to our site value because it is significantly bigger. You'll want to look at this in the opposite case where you have a site value that is much smaller. The appraiser is also going to negatively adjust your subject property for having a smaller lot. If the tables were turned here and we were the smallest lot in the area, there would be a negative impact on adjustment here.
So the positive 52,000 is saying that comparable sale one is, he's giving it 52,000 more value for that property.
He's giving our subject $52,000 more for his lot size. My property here on Crest Vista, this plus means that it's in favor of my subject.
Oh, okay.
If it was a negative, like it is here, so negative 75,000, negative 75,000, these properties here, comp 2 and 3, have views. My property has no view. There's a residential view is what that means. This comp 2 and comp 3, he adjusted $75,000 for the views that comp 2 and 3 have. A view is a big deal. People pay big money for a view. So he made that negative adjustment based on no view for my subject. Does everybody get that so far?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So down here, your quality of construction, quality 3 and 4, quality, you're going to see quality 3 on most everything. You know, if it's a new construction or something, you might see better quality. In most cases, you know, properties in LA are older. My subject here is the actual age of the property is 58 years. And then he's got the age of the comps here as well. The condition of the property, my property was renovated versus comp number 1 was not. I got $125,000 positive adjustment because my property is in better condition than comp number 1. C4 is a worse condition, by the way. And so this matters. If your property, your subject property, whether it's your buyer or your seller, if their property that they're purchasing or selling is renovated or not, and a comp that you're using or it shows up in the appraisal is in better condition, you're going to see an adjustment for better or worse condition here. You've got your bedroom count, square footage, bathroom count. Again, this is all based on public record. If there's a variance or a difference, you would need to make sure that the appraiser is aware of that. And in terms of unpermitted square footage, it depends what it is. It depends on the loan program. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but it would matter in certain cases. So this is all based on public record. Over here on our comp, that's only 1,500 square feet. He did a adjustment here for square footage and for bedroom count. This one's only 3 and we've got 4 here. So he did an adjustment for bedroom count and he did an adjustment for square footage here. Down below here, we have basement, heating, cooling. If there was a pool, it would be noted here. My subject does have a pool. Comp number 1, comp number 2, and comp number 3, none of those have pools. So he adjusted $75,000 for it because my property does have a pool. 2-car garage. And then you're going to scroll down here. Here's your net adjustment amounts here. And then you're going to come down here. And this is where your value's at. And this is a big ticket here. You want to look here at the bottom of the page where your value is indicated. And you want to make sure that the box is always marked as is. If the box next to it is marked subject to completion, that means that there's something that needs to be fixed prior to closing. It could be anything. It could be peeling paint. It could be maybe the pool's empty. It could be some rotted out fascia board that's exposed and visible to the appraiser. It could be anything. So you want to note here, you want to look here and make sure that this as is box is checked. That means that there's no conditions to be completed. The property's fine. There's nothing that needs to be done prior to closing. And then down here you have your value, and this is the date. It's important to note that the appraisal and the value or the opinion of value is given on the date of inspection. So I've had this come up, and this happen as well when we're talking about a rebuttal situation. The appraiser calls up, let's pretend this is a purchase. The appraiser calls up, schedules the appointment with the listing agent. The appraiser goes out, inspects the property on July 25th. We get the appraisal report back and there's a discrepancy or a variance in value. We need to do a rebuttal. If you're going to supply me comps, the comparables need to be prior to the date of this inspection date. Providing me with a comp that sold after this date is totally irrelevant because the appraiser had already gone out there. And the value of opinion is based on the date of inspection. It's not post date, it's not pre-date, it's not anything. It's the date of inspection. So providing me with new listings, a new listing that popped up on August 5th when my appraisal was July 25th is not going to work. The data needs to be based on and available on the date of that inspection. Does everybody get that?
Yes.
Okay. Super important, because I know things pop up, and obviously, you know, you could have a sale that closes and all of a sudden the neighbor sells their house and it goes up for $100,000 more. If you had an appraisal done and appraiser go out before that happened, unfortunately, it's not a comp. It's the appraiser is providing an opinion of value based on the date of inspection and based on the data that's available at the time of inspection. So the next couple pages, pretty boilerplate. I mean, you're going to see a lot of information just about Los Angeles County, Ventura County, environmental hazards, not necessarily permitting information, but just sort of general factual information. The appraiser also always knows that they're not qualified to detect substances. They're not professional inspectors. They're not professionals outside of their field of being an appraiser. So they're not able to comment on any sort of engineering information or structural information. The only thing they can comment on is visual, visual and visual things at the time of the inspection. So if you have a giant crack in a wall somewhere inside the house, or you know, that's evident on the raised foundation, the appraiser has a responsibility to comment on it. They're not a foundation expert, but they have a responsibility to comment on it, and that could potentially result in requiring additional inspection and additional repairs. So moving on, cost approach, you're going to see this on every appraisal. You've got your square footage. I don't know what the formula is for calculating this. I don't know if they have a table or a tool or a special calculator for figuring out, you know, cost to build per square foot. I don't know how they come up with this. But this is where the information is based on the appraiser's opinion of cost of rebuilding. You have site value, you have the dwelling, the pool, you know, all of that information. If there was an ADU, you'd have the information here about the cost to rebuild an ADU. We're going to move on. There's no HOA here. If there was, that information would be here. Just like the purchase contract, the appraiser is also going to get any and all information they can about the HOA. Number of units in the building, how many are for sale, how many have sold. You know, they're going to get as much information, and that information would be here if it was a condo. Let's see here. This is all basic information, disclaimer, sort of disclosure, their scope of work. Again, they repeat over and over. They're not an expert in anything. Their job is to simply appraise the property based on market data. It's also important to note too, an appraiser is not, I won't say never, but rarely ever would an appraiser seek out to use off-market comps. The reason for that is that they're off-market, and the data and the information, it's incredibly difficult to get information in the background on that sale. When you're talking about an off-market sale, it wasn't obviously listed to the public. It never hit the market. In terms of the data available for the type of sale that might have been for an off market, it's incredibly challenging. The appraiser would want to see probably a closing statement. They want to know, is it an arm's length transaction? Was it done between family members or between people that knew each other? Did, excuse me, did a contractor just go in and offer somebody cash off the street kind of thing to buy their house? It gets really, really challenging. So using off-market comps almost never happens. If there's data available and the appraiser does what they're supposed to do and they make adjustments and all of those things, they almost never use off-market comps because it's difficult. It's difficult to know if the transaction was above the board, are there agents involved? Was there, what was the story with it? So it becomes really challenging with off-market comps, especially if you're talking about doing any sort of rebuttal. So now we're moving on. Here's more comps. Comp 4 was a sale, and then comp 5 and comp 6 are listings. They were current listings, at least in July. Again, distance is everything. All of these comps on this appraisal have been under 3/4 of a mile from the subject property. Again, price per square foot, kind of irrelevant. Square footage plays into that big time. The bigger the property, the lower it is per square foot. In terms of how an appraiser is going to compare something, this one, our subject property is 2,300 square feet, 2,363. This one next to it, comp number 4 is 2,928. There's obviously a pretty substantial difference there. I would say, let's see here. I would say the general rule of thumb is like a 20 to 25% variance on square footage. You notice we haven't seen any comps here that are over 3,000 square feet. This one is certainly bigger, but he also did a $42,000+ adjustment for just the square footage. So appraisers have a certain guideline and a certain benchmark. Can they appraise a 2,363 square foot house with a 3,500 square foot house? No, it's not a comp, not even close. Over 1,000 square foot difference is not a comp. The job of the appraiser is to find the most comparable and like properties to our subject. And then again, they're going to do these adjustments here. So if you look at this one, comp number 4, he made a $103,000 adjustment just based on the sale date of this. So I get asked this all the time, are appraisers noting and adjusting based on the market? And the answer is yes. If they have to go back that far for a comp, there is an adjustment. And more than likely, there's a comment later on in the report that addresses the increased market and the lack of available comps. And then again, here you've got site value adjustments, view adjustments, bedroom and bathroom. This one's adjusting $15,000 for an extra bathroom. You've got comp number 5. I haven't Googled this one, but maybe it's in not great condition. He adjusted $125,000 for ours being in better condition. Does anybody have any questions about the graph and comps and all of that?
Hey, Andy.
Hi.
Hi. Sort of related. I mean, it was interesting to hear that you can use listings versus sold. But I just have a question about if an appraiser's in an area that they're really very unfamiliar with, and I know we have to be very careful about the bias, what can we actually talk to? Like, can we follow them? Can we give them information? I was just told offer them comps at the end, things like that. But if they really don't have information about where they're appraising, including a lot of gentrification, let's say, in a neighborhood, what is like the boundary of what we can and cannot do while they're actually on the property?
Oh boy. I mean, that's tough. And I don't necessarily have an answer for that. I mean, any of us in this business or industry, you can't intimidate an appraiser to get you value. I mean, I would say I don't have an answer. Once the appraiser's at the property and on site and doing the appraisal, the best thing you can do is show up prepared with as much information and data that you can. If there is something about the neighborhood that is relevant and key to the data and how somebody would look at a property, you want to make sure you share that information with them at the inspection. Now, something else you can do, and I've had this happen before as well, especially if you're talking about a unique type property where there truly is a lack of comps. When the appraiser calls to schedule the appointment, if you're the listing agent, you could certainly ask the appraiser if they're familiar with the area, or from the area, or, from the immediate area. If they're not, you could certainly ask the lender to find somebody that is closer in the vicinity and reassign the appraisal. I've had that happen as well. I had an appraisal that was done in like Valley Glen, I think, and the appraiser came from Huntington Beach. And it was a whole thing. We ended up having to do a rebuttal and so forth. But, show up with as much information as you can. And if you are the listing agent and you're responsible for scheduling that appraisal, it doesn't hurt to ask if the appraiser's familiar with an area, especially if there's question on whether you're going to get value. If there is a lack of comps and there's a lack of data, ask if they're familiar, and just provide them with as much information as you have.
Okay, yeah, it is a situation like that where on the income end of the property, the data is there, but for the sales comps, the data is not there because there's nothing like this particular project that was rehab. So I didn't even know, like, do I have to offer him the data, or they don't have to take it, right? Like, I don't want to be too obtrusive, but there is really information that I have to share. And I didn't know if I have to wait till they do their thing and do it at the end or walk around with them, blah, 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 because I don't certainly want to do the wrong thing, but I also want to make sure they understand what's going on in the neighborhood. Because we are in a rebuttal and the appraisals were thrown out, so we're back to square one.
Oh, it was thrown out.
Yeah, it was thrown out.
Good. That's great. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to offend an appraiser, and you don't want them to feel awkward or uncomfortable when they're at the inspection. I mean, if it was me, I'd probably approach the appraiser from when they first get there and just say, hey, I have all this data and I have this information. I know it's a unique property. Here's what I have. Here's the information on the neighborhood and the gentrification and whatever. I'd probably just say it up front, instead of, you don't want to lurk.
Yeah. And I don't want to just sort of give it at the end, because I want them to kind of bear in mind what's going on, especially since these low appraisals that we got were thrown out, so.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, especially when you're talking about income properties, because there haven't been a lot of those on the market because there's been rent moratoriums in place for so long. Um, you know, and landlords haven't been able to sell. So,
For
um,
the for the property one, is that arm length? Is that what that stands for? ARML on
where are you
sales
thinking?
or financing, where you said
Mm,
there's 2 listings and 1 sale?
yeah. Okay. So where
Yeah.
she's talking about, where it says arm's length, or conventional, an arm's length transaction, means that it's legitimate. There was a buyer, there's a seller, there was an escrow company, it was listed for sale. Everything was just normal, vanilla, easy peasy. If there was something going on where, I don't know, a business partner
Right.
was selling to another business partner or something, it would say non-arm's length here.
Mhm.
Does that
And
make
then
sense?
0 means 0 credit.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, the zero credit just means at the time of the inspection. Obviously, you know, you can go under contract, the appraiser can go out, and in that time, I mean, it happens to me all the time. We get the appraisal back before the negotiations for the repairs and stuff are done. So the appraiser's just going based on the contract. It
Right.
could end up with concessions, but
Right.
based on when they did the inspection, you know, and concessions don't get recorded either. So after a property closes, I mean, you guys would know more than I do. The MLS doesn't say a $15,000 credit was given for the chimney, right?
Right.
And then over here under the listing, it just says listing, and if it is pending, it would say pending, or if it's not pending, it would say active. And then it's got, you know, the month and the year that it's listed. So that's how you read comps. And again, the biggest thing is distance, and you want to look at square footage and bedrooms and bath counts, as well as the site information. Quality certainly plays into it. We're going to go and look at some of the pictures and stuff too. But for the sake of arguing an appraisal or looking at an appraisal and going, oh my God, they cut my appraisal. This is what they're looking at. This is what they're after. Again, there is a variance allowed. Can you compare a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom? Yeah, absolutely. But again, the appraiser is going to make adjustments for it. They're going to make adjustments for bedroom count and square footage difference and site difference and quality construction difference and again, you know, time when it was sold. The market is definitely being accounted for here. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're pulling comps for a buyer that's submitting an offer on a property. You know, keep the square footage within 25% of your subject. You're gonna have a better shot, and keep them within a mile. But again, depending on where you are in the city, a mile can look a lot different. A mile from here, from Larchmont, is different than a mile in Studio City. So just keep that in mind. And price per square foot is not the end all be all. And appraisers don't really care about price per square foot. So just because the house down the street sold for $1,000 per square foot, the appraisers don't care about that, because it's all relative. And like I mentioned, the smaller the square footage, the higher your price per square foot's going to be. Going through the report again, most of it is boilerplate, scope of work. They reiterate over and over and over again. Their job is to just give an opinion of value based on the market data available at the time of inspection. They're not legal inspectors, or they don't work for the city and they're not in charge of verifying permits or square footage or anything like that. They're pulling just available data. So we're going to scroll through here. The appraiser's always going to comment in every report. They're going to comment on how they made adjustments. Bedrooms and full bathrooms are adjusted at $20,000 and $10,000 respectively. So towards the back of the report, you're gonna always see comments, and this will be a good place to read, especially if there's any sort of discrepancy on value. You want to look here and see how and what they commented on in terms of adjustments. Here he's got a final comment section here of each of the comps, why it was used, days on the market, you know, what it was listed for, upgrades, things like that. So you want to look at all of this too. You're going to have the map or the layout of the property. And you're going to have the street view and where the subject property is. And then you're going to have a map. The map is important. Anytime you're looking at an appraisal, again, it's all about the distance. Here's our subject here. If the appraiser went over this main road, the Garvey Avenue, oops, hold on. Or he had gone over Atlantic Boulevard, he'd have some explaining to do on why he did that. Why would he go over a major thoroughfare, Atlantic Boulevard or Garvey Avenue, to get comps if there were comps right here? Does everybody get that? Or, you know, by the same token, would the appraiser take our subject here, even if our subject was here, let's say our subject was located where comp 5 is, would they go over the freeway? No. It might not be that far, it might be less than a mile, but the appraiser would likely not go over the freeway because you're looking at an entirely different neighborhood, even if it's less than a mile away. So look at your map when you get an appraisal. Look at the map and just check it out. See where your properties land on the actual geographic location and where they are in relation to the subject property, because that's a big deal. When you're talking about doing a rebuttal, providing a comp over here isn't going to do you any justice at all. You're going to want to look for stuff that's in this area. If there is something that is a little further out, you need to have a really good argument for it. That's just how it is. If the appraiser had other comps, or there are better comps that weren't used, that would be your opportunity to do a rebuttal. But you'd have to supply those better comps that weren't used, that are justifiably better comps. So then you're gonna have pictures of the property, all the information here, bedroom count, location, all of that stuff is here again. Pictures of the subject. The first several pages are just of the subject property. And then you'll get into pictures of the comps. Here's this. They just did a new pool. Comp number 1. Here's comp number 1. Comp 2. They only take a picture of the outside. Obviously, they're not gonna creep on the comparables and try to get in their backyards or anything. So they're just taking front pictures. And they're able to access the information and the photos from online as well. I mean, the truth is California is the information is public, so you can go on Redfin. I could look up any of these properties and figure it out, and look at the pictures from when it was listed. So the appraiser is just going to use outside photos. And then you've got the MLS information. And you've got a plat map too. This comes from title. Again, they access all of it. They access the title information. You've got the plat map that shows the subdivision and how it's laid out and the map of the subdivision. And that's really it. Does anybody have questions about any of it?
Will they ever appraise higher than the loan amount? Someone had told me, an agent had told me they won't go over your loan amount.
Yeah, so I think I understand what you're saying. Yes, so here's, in terms of the financing piece of it, the buyer's loan is going to be based on either the contract price or the appraised value, whichever is less. In terms of it appraising for more than your loan amount, it should appraise for more than your loan amount, or you're gonna have to restructure your loan. You can't finance 100% of the property value. So it should appraise for more than what your loan is. In an example of contract price versus appraised value price, let's say you're under contract at $1 million and the buyer's putting 20% down, which means they're financing $800,000. You get the appraisal back and the appraisal comes in at $950,000. You have a $50,000 appraisal gap because you're under contract at $50,000. I mean, $1 million. That buyer's loan will now be based on the $950,000 value and not the contract price. Does everybody get that? So we're going to base the loan amount on the $950 and not the $1 million, which means if you have no appraisal contingency, your buyer's going to have to make up that $50,000 gap, or you figure out a way to restructure the loan if it's possible.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what that agent's point was. They were saying that the appraisal is for loan purposes only, not the true value of the property, is what I was told. So they're not going to appraise it if it goes over maybe the contract price. I don't know if that's, yeah, would that be accurate?
No, I've had appraisals come in higher than what somebody's under contract for.
Okay.
Yeah. I just had one recently, actually. It came in $5,000 more than what they were under contract for. I had another one that came in that was like $35,000 more than what they were under contract for. So as long as it appraises for more than what you're under contract for, then you're all good. If it appraises for less, then that's a different conversation. That's a potential for the buyer to make up that difference, or you'd have to restructure the loan somehow.
Maybe is appraisal value the same as market value? Maybe that's the point they were making.
I mean, the appraised value is the appraised value. Market value, I guess you could argue would be based on whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. But
right. Yeah. A lot goes into it.
Yeah. So that's really it.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Given the market over the past few months,
Yeah.
with people, where there were multiples of people were paying over market value, emotional buying, all of that, how did the appraisals work out there? The hot market that is, we're just sort of coming off of a little bit. Because sometimes people were paying way over, right? Market value, or what we presumed was market value.
I mean, listen, the market is whatever somebody will pay for it. I had several clients that closed in February, March, April, and May that paid $50, $100, $200. I had a couple that just closed. They were over $300,000 over list price, and the property actually appraised. I've had some other cases where they don't appraise. I mean, the reality is, and this goes for any market, honestly, a property is worth whatever somebody will pay for it is the first thing. Second thing is, somebody could pay, you know, in the last couple of months, like we're talking about in that case with the hot market and people paying way more. There's always somebody that's got to set the market, unfortunately. And I've had this conversation with several buyers over the last 6 months, even 8 months. Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to feel like they're overpaying. But guess what's happening? Those sales that closed in February, March, April are now being used as comps, and the properties that are going up and being listed now are being compared next to the ones that oversold by $100, $200, $300,000 just 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So there's a constant rotation and resetting of the market based on comps, based on even a couple months ago. So yeah, where we're seeing stuff now, where we're seeing things listed now, it's all remnants or relevant from a few months ago. And then, you know, they'll continue to go up. And if a property now goes on the market based on a comp from March or April, and that property gets multiple offers and goes $50,000 or $100,000 over, now all of a sudden that new buyer is then setting the market. So it's a constant.
Okay, I got it. I just wasn't sure if they were funding the difference, you know, but I hear what
Yeah.
you're saying. That sets a new precedence on the comps.
Yeah. It depends on circumstances. I had some people that were covering the difference. I had other cases where we'd restructure the loan and figure out a way to increase the loan so they're not making up as much of a cash difference. So anyway, well, thanks guys for showing up. I'm here if you need anything. Always happy to help. Hopefully this was helpful and you got a little bit of information out of it, and we can do it again. I'm always open for suggestions. I had talked to Cameron about doing a loan 101 class here in September, just to go over not necessarily qualification requirements, but the general process of a loan and the life of a loan, if you will, because it's important for you guys to understand what that looks like. There isn't just me working on loans. I've got 15 other people in the background that are helping me do it. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for classes or information you're after, let me know. I'm here. All right, you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Andy.
Yeah, you bet. Bye.